Russia's President Vladimir Putin says that Ukraine's counteroffensive is not seeing any success, saying that Kyiv has not been able to get through Russian defences. Ukraine's counteroffensive in the east and south of the country has now entered its second month.
All attempts by the enemy to break through our defences, and this is their objective, which includes the use of strategic reserves, they have not been successful for the entire time of the offensive. The enemy has no success.
Well, our correspondent Asad Beg joins us now from the town of Konstantinivka, which is around 20 kilometres from Bakhmut. Asad, talk us through the latest there on the fighting. Any movement as this counteroffensive continues?
Well, it's important to say there are things that we are told by the Ukrainian authorities and those things that we are not told. But saying that, we have heard from the Deputy Defense Minister, Hanna Maliar. Now, what she has said is that the Russians are actively advancing in the Kupiansk direction for the last 2 days now, just north of here. And she says that the Ukrainians are on the defensive there. She says that the battles are fierce and positions change several times daily. Now, that's quite sobering. That's quite honest from the Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister there, because what we normally hear is about the Ukrainian advances. And now what we are hearing from the Ukrainians is that the Russians are pushing back. She says in Bakhmut, they are on the southern flank, they are moving forward and they have daily advances. But again, some of those advances are very, very minimal. And she said in other parts of Bakhmut, they fire on the enemy and the enemy fires back. And she says that in Avdiivka, further east to where I'm standing right now, there are fierce battles and no change in positions. Now, what I can tell you is that last night was very busy where we were in the east of Ukraine. We could hear air raid sirens all night. We could hear firing going on. In fact, where we were staying, the walls were shaking because of those strikes. Now, what we don't hear is what exactly has been struck. If a military target is struck, we don't hear that from the Ukrainians. If a civilian target is hit, we hear about a residential building being hit and people being injured. But at the moment, there's no change in those front lines. But we are hearing from the Ukrainians now that in some places, the Russians are making some advances.
Well, we've also, meanwhile, heard President Putin threaten to retaliate with cluster munitions if the Ukrainians use them. But we know that Kyiv's existing weapons and equipment stocks aren't in the best shape, are they?
No, they're not. But in reality, both sides have already been using cluster munitions, and that's been documented by human rights organizations. So when President Vladimir Putin talks about retaliating, well, the Ukrainians will be saying, well, you've already used so many weapons already, not just in the east of Ukraine and the south, but across the country. There's daily airstrikes and drone strikes. Now, what we did was we met up with a tank unit in the east of the country. And there's two things that are striking. One is when you speak to the soldiers, their morale, but also how very young they are. Some of these men are only 21 years old and already been fighting for a year, but also the part of eastern Ukraine that they're operating in, to the north, east and south of them are Russian troops. There's a small pocket in the east of Ukraine where they're fighting, and that's very, very difficult for them. But we met up with this tank unit.
Under the cover of the forest, these men work on T-72 tanks, some of which are older than their parents. The location is secret. It's close to the front line because these tanks need to be repaired and returned to the battlefield quickly. The methods are simple and low-tech. 21-year-old Bumper, as he is known, is a mechanic and tank driver. He's just come back from battle.
It was like raining, shells and mines on us. The field was full of craters and mines, and the commander of my unit died when his tank burned with him in it.
The work is arduous and difficult, but there's no other choice. When they're fixed and upgraded, the tanks make their way back to their positions.
We're being taken to where the tank is hidden. Now, it has to be really well hidden because there's always drones up in the air where Russians can spot the position of the tank and then target it.
This tank crew are getting ready in case they're called out to fight.
Everything is simpler in this tank than others. Of course, it's better to receive the more modern Western tanks. We could then keep these in reserve. It turns out we're fighting T-72s against T-72s. The Western tanks are made to fight against these.
Tank crews are in high demand and essential to Ukraine's counteroffensive.
500 days of war have passed and I haven't seen my family. I'm not given any leave. There's no opportunity. The two sides are evenly matched and we barely managed to beat them.
When the call comes in, they have to be prepared to take positions. This part of eastern Ukraine has Russian forces on 3 sides. When firing, they have to be quick. A shell lands just meters away. They've been spotted. They manage to get away. Undercover, it's always a relief. But they know every mission could be their last. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera, near the front line, eastern Ukraine.